We often think of envy as a petty emotion, a childish impulse, a flaw in character. We imagine it as bitterness, resentment, a green-eyed monster that poisons relationships and corrodes the soul. But this understanding is shallow, because envy is not merely an emotion, it is a form of intelligence, a biological radar system, a psychological compass, a deeply ancient signal embedded in the architecture of human consciousness. At its core, envy is the pain we feel when we see another person possess something we deeply desire but do not yet have, not what we fear losing, but what we long to become. And that difference changes everything. Jealousy guards what we own, but envy reveals what we lack, and what we lack often defines who we are. The misunderstood. Every human mind is constantly scanning its environment. We compare ourselves to others, their achievements, their beauty, their confidence, their success, their freedom. And when we perceive a painful gap between our lives and theirs, envy is born. But that pain is not accidental. It is informational. It tells us, this matters to you. This has value. This is part of your unrealized potential. Without envy, we would not know what to strive toward. Without envy, ambition dissolves, aspiration fades, progress stagnates. Civilizations are built not only on cooperation, but on comparison. The dual nature of envy. Envy is one of the few emotions that can either destroy you or transform you, depending entirely on how it is processed. When resisted, suppressed, or denied, envy becomes bitterness, hostility, sabotage, chronic resentment, emotional paralysis. But when understood and integrated, envy becomes motivation, clarity, direction, focus, psychological momentum. It becomes the fuel of transformation, and no character embodies this dual nature more tragically than envy. Who is envy? Envy is not merely a villain. Envy is a psychological wound given form, a living symbol of existential insecurity, a being born not through nature but through forbidden creation. Unlike humans, envy has no childhood, no developmental story, no biological ancestry, no generational memory. His existence is artificial. And that single fact defines everything, because identity is not merely what we do, it is what we come from, and envy comes from nowhere. Ontological inferiority. Most human beings suffer from feelings of inferiority. They believe they are not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not confident enough. But envy's inferiority is not social, it is ontological. He does not merely believe he is lesser, he knows he is artificial. He exists in a world of natural beings bound by evolution, reproduction, and organic continuity, while he himself stands outside this cycle. He is not born, he is made. And this knowledge becomes a psychological poison, because to be human is to belong to a lineage, and envy belongs to none. The wound of artificial consciousness. Imagine possessing full emotional awareness while knowing your very existence is unnatural. You feel longing, desire, loneliness, fear, attachment, but none of it has roots. Your mind awakens into consciousness without history, no mother, no childhood, no formative love, no gradual becoming, only immediate existence. This creates a fracture at the center of envy's identity, a fracture so deep that it can never heal, the mask of contempt. So envy does what psychologically wounded beings often do. He inverts desire into hatred. He mocks humanity. He belittles human weakness. He ridicules emotion, attachment, and vulnerability. But this cruelty is not dominance. It is defensive contempt. Because what envy truly feels is longing, shame, inferiority, exclusion. And contempt is the armor that keeps those emotions from crushing him. The psychology of self-erasure. Envy's shape-shifting ability is not merely tactical. It is symbolic. It represents a profound psychological truth. Envy has no stable self. Identity is borrowed form. Humans build identity through memory, experience, emotional continuity, social feedback. But envy lacks all of these. So instead of developing identity, he imitates it. He becomes other people. He wears their faces, their bodies, their voices. Each transformation is an escape from self-awareness, because to remain himself is unbearable. Identity diffusion. In clinical psychology, this resembles identity diffusion, a condition where the individual lacks a coherent sense of self. Such individuals imitate others, constantly shift personas, feel hollow internally, experience chronic emptiness. They do not ask, "Who am I?" They ask, "Who can I become so I don't have to be me?" is his envy's eternal question. Self-erasure as survival. To exist is to suffer. To imitate is to forget. So envy becomes others, not to deceive but to survive. Every transformation is an act of psychological anesthesia, a brief escape from existential pain. Envy and the human condition. Envy is not a monster separate from humanity. Envy is humanity's shadow. He embodies what humans feel but refuse to confront. The pain of comparison. Human consciousness evolved to compare. We measure status, resources, skill, desirability, But modern life intensifies this process beyond anything evolution prepared us for. We compare ourselves not to villages of 100 people, but to millions. This produces chronic inferiority, chronic dissatisfaction, chronic identity instability. And in this sense, envy is not inhuman. He is hyperhuman, symbolic meaning of envy's hatred. Envy's contempt toward humanity masks a devastating truth. He envies humans for their fragility, because fragility proves authenticity. Humans bleed, they age, they decay, they suffer, and yet their pain has meaning because their lives are finite, their choices matter, their mistakes cannot be undone. Envy, in contrast, is effectively immortal, but immortality without belonging is not a gift. It is isolation without end. At the center of envy's existence lies a single unbearable realization. I can never be human, no matter how many forms he takes, no matter how perfectly he imitates. No matter how many humans he destroys, he remains what he is, artificial, and this knowledge corrodes his psyche from within. Existential shame. Shame is not simply embarrassment. Shame is the feeling that your very being is defective, and envy experiences shame at the deepest possible level. He does not hate what he does, he hates what he is. This creates chronic self-loathing, which inevitably becomes aggression. The psychological collapse. Envy's final breakdown is not merely defeat, it is psychological disintegration. When stripped of his arrogance, mockery, and cruelty, what remains is a terrified consciousness. A being who realizes he does not belong, he cannot belong, he will never belong, and in that moment his hatred dissolves, revealing grief. Envy as a diagnostic tool of the soul. Now, let us return to envy as a human emotion, because the tragedy of envy reveals a profound truth. Envy is not meant to be avoided, it is meant to be interpreted. When we envy, we are receiving psychological data. Envy answers a critical question: what do I secretly want to become? Envy as precision compass. We do not envy randomly, we envy selectively. You do not envy skills you do not value, you envy intelligence, confidence, wealth, power, beauty, creativity. Each object of envy reveals a hidden ambition. Envy strips away social conditioning and exposes your true priorities. Proof of possibility. Envy arises most strongly toward those we perceive as similar. This is no accident. If someone like you can succeed, then you have no excuse. And this realization hurts, because it confronts complacency. Envy says, this can be done, so why haven't you done it? Envy identifies the precise distance between who you are and who you could become. It reveals skill deficits, discipline failures, knowledge gaps. It is brutal but accurate. Envy as motivational energy. Contentment sustains life, but discomfort transforms it. The sting of envy generates restless energy. When channeled correctly, this energy becomes obsession, focus, work ethic, transformation, competitive pressure, and human evolution. Civilizations do not rise through comfort. They rise through competitive pressure. When one individual advances, others feel envy, and this creates a rising tide of improvement, innovation, skill development, cultural growth, technological acceleration. Without envy, societies stagnate. Without envy, excellence disappears. Why envy is the most tragic homunculus. Among all the homunculi, envy is uniquely tragic, because his desire is not for pleasure, not for power, not for dominance. He desires existence itself, to belong, to matter, to be real, but he never can, and that makes envy the embodiment of existential despair. Envy as the engine of becoming. Envy is not evil, it is unfinished potential crying out for expression. It is the psyche saying, there is more for you, but that whisper is painful, because growth requires sacrifice. Comfort must die, identity must evolve, the old self must dissolve. And so envy burns, but that fire is transformation. Envy is not the enemy of happiness, it is the enemy of stagnation. Envy did not fail because he envied, he failed because he could not become. But humans can, and that is the difference. How the brain measures self-worth. Envy does not emerge from emotion alone, it emerges from calculation. The human brain is constantly running invisible algorithms, status comparison, resource assessment, skill benchmarking, social hierarchy evaluation, and envy is the emotional output of this computational process, the neural circuitry of comparison. Modern neuroscience identifies envy as activating three major brain regions: anterior cingulate cortex, pain of social exclusion; ventral striatum, reward prediction and motivation; prefrontal cortex, cognitive appraisal and self-evaluation. When you envy someone, your brain is literally computing. Where do I stand in relation to them? This is not emotional weakness, it is biological calibration. Why envy hurts physically. Envy activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. This is not metaphorical. Social inferiority hurts because evolutionarily exclusion meant death. Your nervous system interprets relative failure as existential threat, which is why envy can feel crushing, paralyzing, obsessive, but pain exists to force adaptation. Envy and dopamine, the chemistry of aspiration. Dopamine is not the pleasure molecule, it is the pursuit molecule. When envy is triggered, dopamine spikes, not because you feel good, but because your brain is saying, there is something valuable here, go get it. This is why envy is so closely tied to ambition, and why suppressing envy suppresses drive. Human identity is not discovered, it is constructed, and envy plays a foundational role in that construction. The psychology of modeling. Every human being begins by imitation. Children do not create identity, they absorb it. They watch parents, teachers, peers, heroes, and they copy. This is not weakness, it is how competence is transmitted across generations. Envy is the emotional signal that tells us this model matters, this is worth copying. Envy and the apprenticeship of becoming. Every master was once an envious student, every innovator began as an imitator. Every elite performer once looked at someone else and thought, I want that. Envy initiates the apprenticeship phase of growth, identity crystallization. Over time, envy becomes selective. We stop envying whole lives. We start envying components. This is when identity solidifies. We no longer want to be others. We want to integrate their strengths into ourselves. This marks psychological maturity. Toxic envy versus transformative envy. The difference between collapse and transcendence lies in how envy is processed. Pathway 1. Toxic envy. When envy is suppressed, denied, or moralized, it mutates into bitterness, resentment, chronic hostility, victim mentality, external blame. This produces psychological stagnation. The individual becomes hypercritical, cynical, emotionally frozen. Toxic envy destroys from the inside out. Pathway 2. Transformative envy. When envy is acknowledged, analyzed, and integrated, it becomes clarity, direction, motivation, discipline, mastery. Transformative envy fuels skill acquisition, strategic learning, identity expansion. This is the psychological alchemy that turns pain into power. Strong identity does not collapse under comparison, it learns from it. Envy and the architecture of greatness. Every domain of excellence is built on envy, not resentment, but reverent competition. The hidden role of envy in mastery. Elite athletes envy faster runners. Great artists envy greater painters. Visionary entrepreneurs envy world builders. Scientists envy brilliant minds. This envy becomes obsession. Obsession becomes discipline. Discipline becomes mastery, competitive pressure, and human progress. Societies rise when competitive envy remains constructive. When envy becomes destructive, civilizations collapse. History repeatedly demonstrates innovation emerges from rivalry. Excellence emerges from comparison. Advancement emerges from aspiration. Without envy, progress halts. Envy and the meaning crisis of modern life. Modern society suppresses envy. We moralize it, we pathologize it, we shame people for feeling it. But this has consequences. The death of aspiration. When envy is suppressed, ambition fades. People become passive, comfort-seeking, stagnant, directionless. This leads to existential emptiness, loss of purpose, meaning collapse. Envy as antidote to nihilism. Envy hurts because it proves you still care. If you envy, you still desire. If you desire, life still has meaning. The absence of envy often signals not peace but emotional numbness. Envy, suffering, and existential maturity. To mature psychologically is to reconcile with envy, not suppress it, not indulge it, but integrate it. Envy as existential teacher. Envy teaches humility, realism, limit awareness, aspiration. It humbles the ego while expanding potential. Why envy fades with maturity. As identity solidifies, envy narrows. We stop wanting everything. We start wanting what truly aligns with our essence. This is when envy becomes precision guidance, not torment. Envy and the art of becoming. Envy is not evil. It is unfinished identity demanding completion. It is the voice of your potential whispering, there is more. Envy hurts because growth is painful. It dissolves comfort. It shatters illusion. It exposes inadequacy. But without envy, there is no transcendence. Why envy destroyed? Envy. Envy collapsed not because he envied. He collapsed because he could not transform. He was trapped in fixed existence. Humans are not. We are plastic, adaptive, capable of becoming. And this makes all the difference. Envy is the fire at the edge of your identity. It burns away what you are to reveal what you might become. Ignore it and stagnate. Understand it and ascend. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.